So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the second in our Sustainability by Design series, the drivers and benefits of sustainable IT. If you all just want to sit back and relax, we're about to get started. I'll quickly run through the house rules with everybody. First, we're going to do the usual acknowledgement. So I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. So the house rules, as ever, keep your video on all the time, please. If you can rename yourself with your first name and company, that makes it easier to interact. You will be muted. You can ask questions through the moderated chat, which hopefully you're all used to by now. You can use the private chat to contact other participants. You can also switch between speaker view and gallery view to make things easier. We do record the conference, we do not record the breakout rooms, and there will be 3 polls launched during the conference. So if we can all stay focused and engaged, that would be lovely. So I'll just run through the introductions. So the first session, which Michelle was kind enough to facilitate 4 weeks ago, we looked at what the climate crisis is and how we are currently responding or not responding, unfortunately, in many instances. That session was based on the Truth in 10, which was courtesy of ex-Vice President Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. And we really sought to gain an understanding of the breadth and depth of activity in the Australian, New Zealand market addressing climate change. And we looked at what we could do to assist CIOs in determining the urgency of the action required and what their role was in responding to the emerging market demand to have sustainability as a serious consideration in their IT strategies. And we also looked at how we could help CIOs have a stronger voice in both the kind of board and in the C-suite to drive those types of agendas. In the second session, today's session, we're going to look at the drivers and benefits of sustainable IT. So we're going to explore the key element organizations should be considering for creating sustainability in IT and the role that CIOs and digital leaders have. So what are the key drivers and benefits? We'll look at developing business cases and gaining approval for investment in projects with long-term benefits, which can often be difficult. And we're going to look at how we can try and change the focus in the boardroom. So how important are things like procurement, culture, design thinking, agility, service delivery, etc., and other strategies in a CIO's contribution to sustainability. So ideally, we're going to learn from each other, see what the benefits gained from the investment of time and resources in sustainability initiatives, how they're sold to the C-suite or the board, and help develop a practical shopping list of innovations that we could explore in more detail in later sessions. Today's session is going to be run by Zach Scott. Zach has been an innovative and transformational leader for over 20 years, both in Australia and in Europe. Zach is a huge proponent for agile transformation and has driven these in startups, SMEs, and in corporate organizations over the last years. Very customer focused, sees that as the main driver in all initiatives. Welcome, Zach. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you this afternoon.
Thank you, Alistair. Before we start, first of all, welcome and nice to see you all who have joined this session today. I'd like to just recap shortly what we covered in our first session of the SWAP series, also to refresh our memories for the ones who were there and the ones who weren't, just to bring you up to speed what we have covered in the first session. Alistair already mentioned some things. So we ran some polls in the first session before and during the first session. We asked, are your organizations taking an active role in addressing climate change? Are you addressing climate change in your IT portfolio? Have you made commitments to reduce your carbon emissions? And unfortunately, or not quite surprisingly, the majority of organizations in Australia and New Zealand are not actively addressing climate change at the moment. And only up until today, less than 10% of Australian companies have committed to net zero. We of course hope that these numbers will change very soon and very quickly. And that is also part of our web series here to drive awareness and to bring sustainability more into focus of organizations and leaders. What we found very positive and inspiring, of course, was that many digital leaders want to be involved and they want to play an active role in addressing climate change. And that, of course, is a great starting point for us and for many organizations to move forward in driving sustainability. Alistair, if you could please move to the next slide. We had some discussions in the first session and just try to gauge what is on your mind, what is going on in your organizations when it comes to sustainability. And there was a common tune that many organizations appear to be waiting for some direction coming from the government. Many organizations are waiting and hesitating because it's not quite clear which steps should they be taking. What is the right way to move? Are we staying with coal to move to gas? Is renewable the new thing? So there's hesitation in many organizations. Also, we found that there are still question marks in the leaders' eyes and heads when it comes to sustainability in terms of monetary incentives. And of course, for many organizations, money is king, is what drives an organization forward. And if you can't link an initiative to whatever monetary incentive, it is difficult to sell it as a business case. However, we also found that there are already many transformations going on in many companies and organizations, and we can use them to change the mindset of people, to embed sustainability into a transformation program to drive awareness and results. We can utilize learnings and concepts, methods from those transformations, from data-driven initiatives and decision-making to DevOps concepts, to make them work for sustainability, to integrate climate change into our transformation programs and make them become part of our KPIs. So let's be involved, let's take a lead. That was one of the major voices out of the discussions in the first session. As an outcome, the major outcome was that we are in a position that we can shape the IT portfolio and strategy of an organization with sustainability in mind. We are already in a position where we can look at our procurement requirements and in our negotiations and see what vendor is using what kind of carbon emissions, what kind of emission targets, and make them part of our negotiations. We can address business continuity in the boardroom as a driver. And at the end of the day, a green or going green often means reducing your risks in many aspects. The energy market is changing, the environment is changing, and these are all results of the climate change. And this is something we can use as drivers to shape the mindset. We can invest in renewables. There's nothing stopping us. And as technical and digital leaders, of course, we can provide data insights. We can inform the board, and we can inform our peers and the organization about data points that are related to sustainability and to business goals and KPIs. And thus we can and should shape the company's strategy today. So, Alistair, what are the drivers and benefits of sustainability? This is what we want to explore in today's session. Alistair already read out some of the key questions we want to investigate today. Before we go into that, I'd like to run a little poll first to see actually where you are coming from, to find out what you are trying to get out of this session, and just to pick you up where you are. It should take only a few seconds. We will look at the key elements that organizations should be focusing on. We look at what is the role of the CIO, how can we develop business cases, how can we shape the focus in the boardroom, and what areas should we consider. I see responses coming in, and from the numbers I see here, many of you are interested to see what your peers are doing. So just to gauge your surroundings, to see the lay of the land, but also many of you want to get some practical ideas how to drive, how you can drive sustainability in your area of work. And that is in line with what we heard in the first session. And I hope that today we will push that line a bit further towards the bottom line, where we can support and to shape the focus of our leadership teams, where we can enrich sustainability use cases and business cases we are actually working on. I hope you all can see the results right now. I'd like to move on then. So before we look at all these questions, what are the drivers and benefits, what are actually the others doing? Just to get an idea of the lay of the land, are we alone? Also, maybe there's some inspiration out there. And there are many, many examples. And I just wanted to mention a few I came across in my own professional life, or you read about in the news. eBay, for example. I worked for eBay 10 years ago, and it was a big rush at the time. They wanted to take their main data center in the United States off the main grid, which was coal-powered, and power it with Bloom Energy fuel cells, which were powered by biogas. And that went live 2012. And that was a conscious step of eBay to move away from coal because they saw it as a fuel without future. And the EPA in the US also changed the rules and regulations around that. So for eBay, it was clearly a business driver to invest into the future. Google already a great driver when it comes to sustainability. They want to fully decarbonize the electricity supply by 2030. AWS want to do the same. They want to do 100% renewable energy for their global infrastructure by 2025. Microsoft is doing quite a lot. They also want to become not just carbon neutral, they want to become carbon negative by 2030. And that includes, of course, a zero waste policy, which entails not just looking at your electricity, but also at all your other waste in terms of what materials you are using, how are you recycling, and so on and so forth. They also provide a sustainability calculator to their customers who are interested in using Azure or who are already using Azure, to see how much more sustainable could certain services, certain solutions be if you used Azure services rather than doing it on-prem, which is, of course, a great driver for customers to see what are the benefits. AMD, they drove an initiative 25 times more energy efficient by 2020. And they achieved the score. They actually went over that. They achieved a goal of, I think, 31 times more energy efficient for their processors, which means that their processors are 80% more energy efficient today than they have been 10 years ago, 5 years ago. They started 2014, 2015 with this initiative. And that also means saving money. You use less power for the same calculations, and you use less energy, and you can get more done in the same time. China pledges to become carbon neutral before 2060. Big news around 3 weeks ago, I think. So it's not just organizations, we're talking about global scale here, countries getting on this as well. And that has, of course, a wider impact on the global economy, not just for IT leaders, not just for IT companies and vendors. That will have an impact to many organizations if a country decides to become carbon neutral. And what is happening right on our doorstep? Well, in Australia, for instance, Bank Australia is carbon neutral since 2011, so for nearly 10 years now. And just recently, there's a private investor initiative called the Climate League that has been brought to life just a couple of months ago. And anybody can sign up to this, any organization can sign up if they want to commit to certain carbon emission reduction goals. And their goal is to achieve the minimum reduction as set out by the Paris Agreement by 2030. So to reduce our carbon footprint in Australia. But on the other hand, we all see the organizations are doing a lot of things, even countries are doing some things, but in Australia, there is still no urgency for climate policy. We are still not quite sure what the government, which direction they are going, which of course is a bit of a shame, but it also reflects what we saw in our first session, that we are still waiting for the government to take action. I think the time for waiting is over. I think it's on us to take the initiative and just take the next step. So what could that next step be? And of course, there are many different ways to approach this, but asking a question, what key elements an organization should consider for creating sustainable IT, I would like to introduce a triangle of information. You often will find it also as a wheel, but today I'd like to use a triangle to point out 3 major dimensions which I think are available in any organization. Alistair, please. And these dimensions are technology, business, and customer. And of course, they are connected with each other and they overlap. But you have all those 3 dimensions in one way or the other available in any organization. And Alistair, what do we have with these dimensions? Of course, we have data from all of these dimensions. We get different data points from these different directions, and we transform them into information, and information can turn into action. And we get data from our technical side, from our infrastructure. We get data from our customers in terms of feedback. We get data from our business in terms of KPIs and performance stats. And this data, of course, we can utilize. This is key information, and we can look at this from those 3 different dimensions to put on our sustainability goggles and look at what can drive sustainability in a certain area. And trying to answer the question, what is the role of the CIO, Alistair? The role of the CIO, of course, is right there. It's right there in the middle. We are, as technical and digital leaders, we sit like a spider in the net, right there in the middle where everything congregates. We are the ones to orchestrate those different dimensions from a data perspective, from a data information perspective. It's our functions that measure the data, that distill information from the data, and of course we can distill sustainable information as well, and then inspire action, create business cases, inform our peers, and shape the focus of an organization, data-driven, so to speak. And that, of course, means we are ideally positioned to drive sustainability in an organization. And if an organization wants to change, and many are on one transformation program or the other, it starts with measuring data. You can't change, or you should not change what you cannot measure. How else will you know that you have changed anything? Let's look at those different dimensions in detail. Alistair, if you could please move on to next slide. Technology. Let's start with technology. What drivers and opportunities from these drivers can we find? So on the left side, we see what we know already, what is existent today. Of course, we have terms like technical debt. We have data from our IT operations, from our infrastructure. For some organizations, we even have Internet of Things data already in their products. We use methods and terms like test-driven development, behavior-driven development. And I met Kent Beck 10 years ago. Kent Beck, one of the authors of the Agile Manifesto, one of the Gang of Four, one of the, for you, probably mostly known by TDD. I met him at a seminar, and he said, 2010 it was, the most important measure for IT in the future will be electron volt, which of course is a measure of energy. And I found that quite inspiring and interesting 10 years ago. And it's still the case today. And the question is, how do we actually measure electron volt or the carbon footprint of IT, and specifically of software? Of course, we do have hardware sensors already. We know the voltage and the power consumption of a CPU and how much warmth it generates. But how much change, how much impact does a certain code change have to our software? How much energy does a certain piece of algorithm use? There is still room for innovation. And there, of course, is an opportunity for the technical guys among us, the technical organizations. There's still patterns out there that need to be created. How do we measure software changes in terms of sustainability? We already have test-driven development, meaning we develop our test cases first and then develop our solutions against them. What if we first defined our sustainability goals for a certain piece of software and then developed our solution against this? Turn this into sustainability-driven development. What if we developed our KPIs, our business KPIs and regulations and policies around sustainability, created rules and requirements, and created it and formed it into governments or governance-driven development? What, of course, if our data centers and our IT infrastructure became more smart and helped us to reduce our energy consumption? Of course, there are cost savings involved, but it also has opportunities when it comes to stakeholder satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Of course, a stakeholder wants to see that the company is future-proof, that it goes with the times, that it's still profitable in 10 years. And this is why eBay decided to move away from coal with their data center power supply. This is why other organizations go towards smart data centers. So there are many opportunities here when we look only at the technology dimension. There is, of course, also much to be learned from it. We can experiment. We don't know everything today. We can take the scientific approach and try to experiment, learn from the results, adapt, and share our findings with others. Lots to be found in technology. Let's look at the next dimension. Let's look at business, at the business side of things. And of course, there are many other drivers there. We have many KPIs, and we look at the business dimensions. We have our business KPIs, we have delivery stats and data around agility and development. Some of us might have value stream maps and KPIs around that in terms of quality and performance. We also have information around our organizational culture, our employee NPS, for example. These all are opportunities or drivers where we can, again, look at sustainability. For example, look at our delivery and value stream KPIs. There's a quality metric in there. If a certain solution or product or deliverable is up to the quality, to the standards we decided. What if we introduced a certain sustainability metric as a quality metric, saying, okay, it does not only have to be semantically correct and need to do what it needs to do, but it also should not use, for instance, fossil fuels. It should not use a certain amount of energy, should not be produced out of certain materials that are not sustainable. What if you introduce this as a quality metric, as an additional quality metric, and looked at our KPIs then? How can we improve our delivery? How can we improve our value streams if sustainability became a quality metric? That, of course, will not only have an impact on sustainability, it will also enable us to uplift the quality of our delivery, because sustainability is something that will help us to create products and solutions that will sell not only today, but also tomorrow, which are more efficient and will be future-proof. We could include the recommendations from the Task Force for climate-related financial disclosure into our KPIs, move towards environmental and social reporting. We can, of course, when it comes to business KPIs and sustainability, talk about our risk planning and mitigation. I mentioned earlier that green often also means lower risks. As I said, with eBay, moving away from fossil fuels to be future-proof, to have a business model where I can power my own data center with energy that is available to an affordable price. Or look at organizations that are in big cities that are close to the shoreline, and we know sea levels might be rising over the next years, and some of these properties are at risk. So what can we do to drive sustainability to lower our risks that the sea levels are not rising as much as currently thought? Of course, again, that also relates back to our company culture and what our employees are thinking about our organization. And many, many more people today are aware of sustainability. They want to do, everyone wants to do their own bit. They want to be part of it. If I look around an organization, people are aware of what materials they use, they don't use. They bring in their own dishes, and they want to use their own cutlery and things like that, but they want to do more. So they want to be part of an organization that also addresses the climate emergency. And therefore, if an organization addresses sustainability in their KPIs, in their value streams, in their ways of working, they also contribute to their own talent, motivation, and satisfaction, the way that people think about their own organization. And of course, it will help an organization to retain their own talent and, of course, attract new ones. It is all about eliminating waste in the end, building the right thing in the right way, and to energize our workers, to give them purpose and to work on something that is important. And that brings us, of course, to the customer dimension, because they are just like us. They are the same. They are are more and more aware today where they want to buy, what they want to buy, and is it sustainable? Has it been produced locally? Is it using fossil fuels? And so on and so forth. And that, of course, means looking at our brand reputation, at our loyalty, brand loyalty. We look at NPS values, customer feedback, and again, there's lots of data here we can use to drive opportunities around sustainability. Of course, there are opportunities here to become a new leader in a market segment, to rebrand your organization to become the most sustainable or the sustainable go-to brand for a certain product. It will, of course, attract new customers. It will help you to retain your customers and uplift your sales and market shares. And if I could put it in the words of Eric Schmidt, who was the Google CEO for some years, if you organize around the customer, the rest will follow. Don't underestimate the voice of the customer. Everything an organization does is actually for the customer. If you don't do it for the customer, why are we doing it? And the customer feedback is therefore the most important tool we should be using, and we should listen to them when it comes to sustainability and see if we can turn it into new solutions to make them happy. Now, before we move on, let us run a second poll to find out what you think, who should actually primarily drive sustainable IT? Should it be coming from the top? Should only be global bodies concerned with that? Or should it be countries through legislations? Should it be all of us, all organizations, or countries, global organizations? Just to see where people think the responsibility lies, so to speak. And I see the answers coming in, and many of you agree it's not the responsibility of a certain body or organization or top-down driven. It is a responsibility of more or less all of us, all organizations, and countries and global bodies. We all should work on this together. There's not one primary driver. We all can play our part to equal share, and we all can do our part. This is what we are talking about here today. So moving on to the next slide, what can we actually do? So now we talked about what are possible drivers and what are possible benefits, but how can we actually turn this into something that is useful for an organization, useful for us to create a business case to drive and shape the focus in our leadership teams. And I'd like to take a leaf out here out of a book of risk management, and many of you will probably know that. Alyssa, if you could just take us to the next slide or picture. There is this risk matrix where we try to organize risks in terms of impact and probability. And risks that are having a very high impact and are very probable, you'll find on the top right corner of this matrix. And risks that are not so impactful and are less likely are more on the bottom left. And that will help us to decide which risks to address most or first and focus on more. And that is, I think, a tool that's being used in many organizations for great benefit. Now, if we just use this matrix, Alistair, and turn it around and call it Sustainability Scorecard, and just invert the colors and say one axis, the x-axis is sustainability impact, benefit in terms of sustainability. And the other axis is the business incentive, the driver for it. Then we can arrange sustainability business cases or initiatives on that scorecard in an equal way as we do with risks. So initiatives that have a high impact on sustainability and have a high business driver will appear on the top right as very sustainable initiatives, very attractive initiatives, and other initiatives that are less impactful and have less incentives are on the bottom left. And again, that will help us to inform opinions and shape the focus. Let me just call out 3 examples, really hypothetical in terms of scoring, but just to highlight how that could work. Let's talk about cloud migration, for instance. It's something that many organizations do today, and of course, therefore the business driver might be very high with 5. However, the impact on sustainability is also not to be underestimated. All 3 major cloud providers today have made a big commitment to become carbon neutral. They already use a majority of renewable energy. So there is a high impact on sustainability if I moved on-prem legacy IT into the cloud, or from my own data center into one of those 3 public cloud providers. So we could say the impact is major with a 4. The business driver is probably very high with 5. So we could score it with a 20 probably. Another example, on-demand automation for non-IT, for instance, lights and air conditions. I worked at an organization in the UK. They had smart light switches. Whenever you entered the room, the light went on, and they had some motion sensors there. And if nobody moved, the light went out after 5 minutes. So the lights went out when somebody left, and when you left the room. Nice idea. However, the impact is probably not as massive as moving your IT to the cloud. And also the business driver is probably very low, because it will firstly mean a big investment. You don't have much return there. So minor impact, low driver, will probably score just with a 4. And the third example, ESG reporting, environmental, social, and governance reporting, something that for listed companies might be a very high driver, because that informs stakeholders, that might have an impact on your share prices. So it might be a very high business driver. And it might have a very severe impact on sustainability, because it will highlight your environmental impact, your environmental layout, and inform the stakeholders about it, and therefore again drive your share prices if you are not becoming active in terms of sustainability. Again, hypothetical, that might be different for any organization, but let's assume it is severe and high in both dimensions, so we score of 25. So Alistair, we just bring up the last picture. So coming back to the scorecard, it might look like this. You have those 3 initiatives: cloud migration for CM, ESG reporting, and on-demand automation. Might look like this on a scorecard. And that's a proposal that might help you and others to create business cases and shape your business focus and the opinion of your peers to drive more sustainability initiatives. So what can we do? What we want to do now is going into breakout rooms and have a session with a smaller group of you, which will be facilitated. And each of you will discuss one specific dimension. I just mentioned technology, business, and customer, and think about what sustainability initiatives you maybe even have running in your organization, or what ideas you think you might have, and try to rate them on the scorecard. Think about how you can measure, how to measure sustainability and how to report on sustainability in a specific dimension. What might be the main drivers? What might be the biggest benefits? And we will all come back here in about 30 minutes and discuss our findings, and hopefully we'll be very inspired afterwards and go back to our businesses and create business cases. Thank you. very interesting discussions. I was lucky enough to jump through the rooms and have a look at everyone's discussion. Mario, would you like to kick us off and give us a little summary of what happened in the technology room? Is Mario there already, or is he still gone? He's on mute. There he is.
Okay, that's better. So I couldn't unmute myself. I'm sorry. Someone must have unmuted me for it. So I had Craig and Jay in my group looking at technology, and earlier on Zach joined us for the beginning of that. Without going through the whole conversation, just in the interest of time, where we ended up landing was we identified 3 initiatives that I'm sure could probably do a bit of fleshing out. The first one was around, you know, and we always talk about moving to cloud, but more efficient devices, operations, plant equipment, kit. Technology can be at the forefront of a lot of that, and having policies and a willingness to move to that is probably one initiative around that. And we believe the incentive would be quite high, probably a 5, and the impact would probably be at least a 4. Again, it depends on the organisation and the drivers, but you could probably put a 5 and a 4 is kind of where we landed on that. So it's 20 on your chart, Zach. The second initiative was around green business continuity, where these days we have business continuity by having backup generators, and we have rooms set up as secondary rooms. We give people, you know, multiple, say, PCs in multiple rooms, depending on the industry again. And what we said was that one thing we could lead would be that you move, say, from diesel and old clunky technology to green and batteries and that sort of thing. You could also move a second data center to a colo where you share the costs. You could also give people the ability, as we've seen through COVID, to work from home and then not have to have spare facilities set up. So with that one, we came up with an incentive of about 4, because we still think it's highly cost driven, and therefore the organisation will probably be quite a bit of incentive. It's within our control, so it's easier to do, so to speak. And the impact would be quite high as well, would be another 4. And then the third one was, given our role in an organisation and our access to data and development, reporting skills, those sort of things, we could take on the role of bringing to the attention of the organisation, using those skills and data, how well it's going, perhaps measures, perhaps comparisons to peers or to other industries. And we thought that's another factor that could drive ESG outcomes. And we came up with an incentive of around 3 or 4. We landed on 4, and an impact probably a 4, but again, it could have quite a high impact if it starts to turn the culture of the organisation to one of being more aware of sustainable opportunities. So that's it. I'll stop there because
Thank you, Mario. That was very, very inspiring and interesting, indeed. Next, we had the business room. I think, Michelle, you were facilitating this one.
Yes, I was, Zach. Thank you. So I had Therese, Jeff, and Dino in the room with me. And we started off with a fairly broad conversation around, you know, how you could measure sustainability, and looked at you know, things like making sure environmental requirements are included in tenders and contracts, being able to publish green credentials so that you know, that people can see whether your company is actually making a difference or not, and that, you know, in turn you could measure the business impact of that. And in some countries in Asia particularly, it's actually a government regulation that your green credentials are published. So it's something that, you know, businesses kind of have to do as well as, you know, wanting to do. We then talked about the opportunity to be a leader in this space for any industry. So looking at, you know, making a business more at the forefront as a competitive advantage. And actually had a conversation around the kind of 3 elements around it, even coming back to the technology side of it in a business, about the energy use or energy side of it is only one component. You've also got to look at the hardware and consumables themselves, and you know what the turnover rate of those consumables are, and where you're buying them from, and what their components are made out of, and so on. And then looking at disposal and waste beyond that as well. So there's kind of all those aspects of it. We then had a conversation, Zach, this was about the time you joined us, about considering the value stream and looking at picking a value stream, looking at it from end to end, and seeing where the waste could be in that value stream that you could then have an impact on climate change or global emissions or what have you by eliminating the waste within that value stream. And particularly tying that to the UN sustainability goals. And I don't know if everybody's aware of those, the 17 UN SDGs, but there are within those, there is a possibility to look at beyond just, climate. There's, social injustice and developing countries and all sorts of other things in those sustainability goals. So we thought that there was a good tie in there and a potential new business opportunity for Jeff and Zach to put a model together that could then be used by lots of organisations. When it came to looking at the matrix itself, rather than do kind of 3 different examples, we looked at one particular case with 3 different ways of solving the business problem. So the business problem was, thanks Therese, was around steel and cheap imports of competitive equipment, consumer goods coming in from countries that weren't meeting the emissions requirements that all the producers in Australia are made to meet. So how they could go about addressing that business problem of people, buying these cheap imports without necessarily buying the right product and doing the right thing by the climate. So business-wise, high. The first thing was talking about actually just educating border security so that they realise the damage that these cheap imports are doing to the climate. That might have a reasonable impact in our own market, but it's not actually solving the core problem. So the second, which would have a higher impact on the environment, would be for all the manufacturers of the products, so steel and all their competitors, cooperating on this particular issue. So they all get together and work out ways that they can stop these imports coming into the country. Nice bigger impact from a climate point of view, but still doesn't solve the core problem. To solve the core problem, you've got to go back up the value stream to the manufacturers themselves in those foreign countries and work with those foreign governments and those foreign manufacturers to incentivise them to stop producing these carbon hurting products in the first place. So we figured that had a high impact, and that's probably the range of the conversation we had.
Well, that's certainly very interesting, and it also highlights the complexity of the business dimension. It's so much more than the word lets on, and it is not. It highlights that there's not a one-fits-all solution. It's always a very specific solution for at least an industry, and there are many different dimensions, sub-dimensions to be considered. So we are just starting out, and I think the message here is take the first step, look at one little thing to start with, and then widen your scope rather than looking at the whole picture at once and then just going all crazy because it's driving you nuts because you don't know where to start. Take it baby steps. The last room, I think we had 3 rooms. The last room was, I think, looking at the customer dimension, and Alistair and Vlad were facilitating there. Who of you wants to present?
I can give a quick overview, and Vlad, if you want to, if there's anything else that you want to chip in with. So we looked at customer, I guess, in 3 different categories. So B2C, as you know, us all procuring some sort of service from a bank, as you mentioned, Bank Australia, Zach, or an energy supplier, or potentially buying a car. So that was the kind of examples we looked at. Really need more clarity, maybe some measure around just how green these services and products are that we are sold, and a measure that you can genuinely apply across all services and all products. And trust at the moment is really the key. So you trust that when you pay a little bit more for your energy and your energy supplier tells you that they're planting X amount of trees for that, you know, you kind of trust that that happens. It would maybe be nice to, on your electricity bill, have, you know, some sort of reference to that. You know, you've paid $300 this quarter, you've planted 25 trees, and, you know, make that a bit more obvious and a bit more, you know, give customers the kind of the sort of proof points there. From a B2B perspective, we kind of, again, we spoke about the potential need to really kind of mandate an audit. So if there were an ISO green credential or credentials that organizations had to kind of match, would that potentially be a go or a no-go situation? So if you don't meet certain criteria, you just don't get to tender further. You know, that organisation is kind of cut out the loop and force that upon people. It's really that last mile that is missing. Being able to apply for carbon credits and then, you know, spend them where it actually makes the most sense for that organisation. That's, you know, that's kind of missing. And from a procurement perspective, when you're asked lots of questions, how green are you? Are you negative? Are you neutral? Is that really weighted particularly heavy when it's, you know, compared to the cost of procuring that service? What do you really get for being extra green? You know, is it taken into account as much? So a bit more transparency around that. And then the kind of final piece was on an employee of an organisation as a customer. I've never seen the green credentials of an organisation being promoted to attract employees directly. So in a position description or a campaign that an organisation may run to try and attract employees, I honestly can't ever remember seeing it in a position description, and I've seen quite a few of those over the years. But Sal kind of made the point that, you know, it should probably be down to the prospective employee to be asking those questions as well. And in the group we had Jerry, Bernie, Sal and Vlad, and we've all been in a position, or they've all been in positions where you're hiring or, you know, obviously kind of looking for work, and it's just not something that really comes up in conversation particularly often. We did suspect that it would become more common as, you know, people younger than us started to come through the ranks. That's probably something that's a lot more, you know, up there kind of list of priorities. We also kind of spoke about the attraction of that opposed to things like, you know, a ping pong table and free beer in the office. And again, with COVID, when people are spending less time in a physical location, these other things, you know, anything to differentiate your organisation and make you more attractive as an employer you should be shouting that from the rooftops. And it probably just hasn't started to come through yet, but that's something that we all felt was, you know, something that people should be sharing and asking about a lot more. So, you know, mandating and auditing has to be improved. The promotion of your green credentials are asking about those more so. And then, you know, really being able to be transparent about the weighting that you put on that and how green you really are. I mean, you spoke about, you know, electric vehicles. You know, it's great that you don't need to fill them up with petrol, but the reality is, you know, how did you dispose of that battery? How does all the materials that go into that battery, how do they get procured? You know, is that in some mine in the middle of Africa with kids digging out some sort of precious metal? It's just not as transparent as we would all like it to be. And without that, as a consumer, it's really hard to make an accurate decision and genuinely compare one product or service against another. So there has to be some sort of kind of mandate an audit process in there for people to be able to compare.
Thank you, Alistair.
If there's anything else to add that you remembered from.
It was great. I'm just going to add, and we briefly touched on supply chain as a way to demonstrate, to clients the value as well. We touched on it really briefly, where when we're procuring, or if we're the ones, selling into an organization, having the proof and the evidence be really clear, so that the customer of that business can see those benefits too, to be able to allow to show. So really, as a supply chain also, everybody being more visible and demonstrating to allow that evidence so the customers can really see the benefits. So, but we already touched on that briefly.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Thank you, Alistair. Just to add to this, I think one of the challenges here for the customer side is really having a comparable metric cross-company wise, that customers are in a position to compare on an equal bias, so that they can actually create their own opinion in a meaningful manner, and not just having bias in the data. That is probably one of the big challenges here. Thank you all. Thank you all. These were all very interesting contributions and discussions. And I also think it highlights very much so that it is a far more complex field than it might look on the surface. When we talk about sustainability, many people think about green IT and just go to the cloud and you will solve most of your problems. No, it's much more than that. Nonetheless, I think there's lots of inspiration here today. What can be done, that there are things we can do. It's not that we have to wait for anyone to tell us. It's already there. We can already start. And as the saying goes, Rome wasn't built in one day, and so is it with sustainability. We won't create it from one day to the next, but we can start, and that's the most important thing. Don't be afraid of making maybe a wrong move. Be afraid of stopping and not moving. Take a move, learn something from it, take a lean approach, look at your data, look at your feedback, look at all your different dimensions, get inspired, look at your peers, look around, and take the next step based on what you learned. So thank you all very much for these very interesting contributions and sessions. I'd like to run one last poll for today, just to see, has the session actually inspired not just me, but also you? And then thank you again for coming today. And I hope that I will see many of you again for our third session, which we will—
Thanks, Zach. That was great.
Introduce in a moment.
Yep. Thank you all. Thanks for coming along, Zach. Thanks for facilitating. I'll let you wrap up with the poll results, which I think are fairly clear-cut.
Yes. I'm happy to see that no one said no. That's great. I'm very happy to see that. And I'm happy to see that most of you will have something to take with them to bring back to their businesses.
Yep, there we go. Okay, excellent. So the next session, which is going to be on the 25th of November at 4 o'clock, is using design thinking to reduce carbon emissions. So we've looked, lots of people have been using agile techniques with their development teams for many years, and some have embraced human-centric design techniques, commonly referred to as design thinking. So these innovations have enormous potential when applying a sustainability lens to your organizations, as well as enabling process changes for lower emissions. Design thinking can be used to rethink the products and services you provide to your customers, with the aim of, meeting the increasing customer demand for action on climate change. I think we've all agreed that this is something that people are going to be looking for more and more. And we think that CIOs can play a significant role in introducing and embedding human-centric design into the organisations. We're going to have Vlad Finn and Alistair Pryor facilitating that session. So hopefully we'll get to see you all there on the 25th of November at 4 p.m. So thank you all again for coming along. Hope you all enjoyed the session. Look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.